Hi, everybody. This is Jimmy, and you're reading with Jimmy. We're going to analyze The Devil by Guy de Maupassant, and this is an analysis of understanding the devil. And the analysis is by yours truly, Jimmy. Wow. People will be people, won't they? Isn't that what people say? Well, these people, did you read the story with me? The story is one of the most excellent stories ever written that captures motivations of people. And motivations of people are the most complex aspect of trying to figure people out. Have you ever tried to figure a person out? Have you ever tried to figure yourself out? Wouldn't you agree? When you read The Devil by Maupassant with Jimmy, you should have experienced a variety of motions as these characters bartered with death. Remember? A 92-year-old woman is on her deathbed, and her farmer's son has to, quote, I got to get the wheat in before it goes bad. So that's the conflict. Sit with his mom as she passes away, or let the wheat go bad. Or, as the doctor says, and he's shamed into this, Henri Beauchamp, the son, is shamed by the doctor who tells him, I will let you die like a dog when it's your turn to fall sick. Is that clear? In other words, you got to take care of him unless he takes care of his mom. Who has to say that to somebody? So, unless Mother Rapper will watch over his mom. And that's after his mom agrees that he should leave her and go take care of the wheat. So his mom, who's grown up on the farm with him, also says, no, don't worry about me. Don't worry about me. Go take care of the wheat. But the doctor forces his hand, makes him, shames him. So, but it's not so much shame as it is the threat from the doctor. So we start to see the character's character being revealed, right? He didn't do this because it's the, quote, right thing to do. He did it because the doctor said he would let him die like a dog when he fell sick. So you know the rest of the story. Mother Rappert, who makes a living sewing and sitting with the dead, bargains with Beauchamp. That's what she does. She sews and she sits with people who are dying, kind of like a portable roving daycare center, right? Or an elder center or a hospice. And she settles on Beauchamp on a fee that she charges, something she never did with her flat fee. So she settles on a one-time payment as opposed to a flat fee, as opposed to her hourly rate or her day rate. The word callous came to my mind when I read this story with callous, callous meaning showing or having an intensive or cruel disregard for others. Didn't that seem like that to you? That she was callous, Mother Rapid? It's from the Latin callosus, hard-skinned. There was a John Wayne movie where the Duke looks up at the bad guys and says, you've got a lot of hard bark on you. Was that John Wayne or was that Paladin? I think it was Paladin. Jimmy likes Western. Anyway, you got a lot of hard bark on you. The lack of emotion by these characters, to me, was stunning. Wouldn't you agree with that? I mean, what would you do for your mom if she was dying? Would you go to work every day? Would you leave her? Would you be with her? What would you do? Well, we read classic literature to learn how others lead their life and how to lead our own. And I'm sure you know people like this, don't you? Yeah, there's a little callousness in the reaction. Maybe we ourselves act callously sometimes. Right? I was in the president's office who ran a company worth $300 million after his wife passed away for one of my clients, and I was helping him write her obituary. This was a longtime client, and when I walked in that day to offer my sympathy, he got up from his desk, we hugged, and he sobbed on my shoulder. It was a stunning moment, one I'll never forget. He collected himself, went back to his desk, and I sat on the other side as he spoke, and I took notes for the obituary. And then the phone rang. He picked it up and said his name in a low, deadpan tone. And then he would say, yes, and pause. Yes. That's how he was talking. Because the guy's wife died, right? So yes. And all the time in a deadpan tone. So that lasted at least a minute and a half. So try to hold your breath or just count a minute and a half when my client finally said, "We're not interested in buying uniforms for our cafeteria staff. Thank you." And then he hung up. And we finished the obituary. Why did I tell you that story? Well, the caller, who should have, but didn't have a clue what the president was feeling at the time. But if he had listened to his tone, he could have guessed something was amiss, something was wrong. And you know this when you talk to people, you can tell their voice. Can you tell I'm reading this to you in an early morning rather than in the afternoon or evening? I use this example in training salespeople because the human voice is so expressive, and so classical literature is so expressive that you get to see and hear and feel people that you normally don't do. You can often tell something is amiss immediately. Just try it. Watch facial. It's like a facial expression. You know when somebody's eyes go to the side when they're talking to you, maybe something is amiss because they don't look at you directly in the eye. Well, you can tell from the tone. Try it. When you're talking to somebody and they're doing something, you can immediately tell from their voice that they're not listening to you. You can do this. So, what about listening to these characters in the story? Should we do that? To their dialogue. Dialogue is the great revealer of character. Or, what about, even more important, watching their actions? This is third-person narrator. There's nobody in the story talking to us. It's a third-person reliable narrator because he's outside the story. Now, if it was one of these characters talking about it, we can be suspect perhaps, but it's not. Third-person narration takes us right inside the people's heads, which is great. Otem's first reaction when the doctor says that he can't leave his mother in that condition is to ask his mom, or his mom, right? That's what he first does. Remember? What do you say? Narrator tells us the dying woman, still in the grip of Norman avarice, nodded and blinked her assent, urging her son to get his wheat in and leave her to die alone. What's avarice? You know what avarice is? Look it up. Those are words that you should look up. Avarice means old or greedy. And she understands economics. Got to get the wheat in. She's been on the farm all her life. Look at the narration. Beautiful words that he uses to describe the farmhouse. And is that a selfless act? That she thinks, no, son, go. Leave me alone. And die. Leave me alone. Is that selfless or is that economic? Does she understand? And then there's Mother Rapper. Third person narrator tells us this about her. Remember this paragraph? When you see these arrows when you read with Jimmy, pay attention to them. Mother Rapper, an old woman who took in ironing and watched over the dead and dying in the village and the surrounding countryside. And as soon as she had finished sewing up a customer in a sheet, right, that he would never cast aside, in other words, is dead, she would go back to ironing the linen of the living. This is juxtaposition, right? What wraps him up in a sheet when they're dead and sews linen during the method for the people she's sewing. As wrinkled as one of last year's apples. There's a description. You see that? As wrinkled as one of last year's apples. Can you think of anybody that looks like? She's spiteful, envious, and incredibly tight-fisted. Whoa. She was always bent double, as if she had broken her back, constantly running the iron over her customers' linen. And she seemed to have a sort of monstrous, obscene passion for death. Her only subjects of conversation were the people that she had seen die, and all the different sorts of death that she had witnessed. Good. And she described these death agonies in great detail, never changing a single word, like a sportsman telling of a shooting experience. Have you ever talked to anybody who caught a fish? They repeat the same story over and over to different people, and it never changes. except the fish might get a little bigger. Sorry. But this is a great description of who this woman is. She has a relationship with death. Third person narration, as we've discussed, is different than first person. The third person narrator is outside the story. So he's telling the narrator outside the story is telling us, and we have to believe him. Otherwise, the story won't make sense. The third person narrator is not the author. I keep repeating that to you, but I will repeat it. The third person narrator is not Guy de Maupassant. It's his narrator. He's just the writer. But the author's anyway, Maupassant's narrator. And we have to believe what he says, or the story will not make sense. So, in the above paragraph, which our narrator paints a vivid picture of Mother Rapid, we learn and we have to believe she's spiteful, she walks bent over. For example, she also seemed to have a sort of monstrous, obscene passion for deathbeds and her only interest in conversations, as we read, right? So she has a relationship with them. She makes money off of death. Can you imagine someone like that? Do you know people who make money off of death? Of course you do. Or maybe you don't yet, but all undertakers make money, right? But they don't sit with people until they die. Those are different types of organizations. So what people talk about, and how they talk, and what they talk about are all tells or tells. Why is this person telling me this? That's something you should keep in mind when you're talking. Why is this person telling me? This story, the death of an old woman, becomes nothing more than a negotiation about money. There seems to be no emotion except for the doctor, right? The doctor. Remember? I'm going to let you die. Horrible death. Towards the end, Mother Rapid suddenly felt uneasy. She went over to the dying woman, who was still in the same condition, short of breath and passive, her eyes open. And the nurse realized that things could go on like this for 2, 4, even a week. And then fear gripped her miserly heart, while she felt a rush of anger against the cunning fellow who had tricked her, and against this this woman who refused to die. So that whole flat fee arrangement is the conflict. She felt fear. Why did she fear? She would lose money. When she agreed to the fixed rate, she realized that the death of Mrs. Bontemps was the determining factor of her profit or her loss. Well, Frank, during this period of time, was a porter. So remember the deal, 6 francs, right? Did she murder Bontemps now by scaring her to death? That's the question. Did she murder them? I would say she did. I remember Sherlock Holmes' story where he said, if you drive a person to suicide, it's murder. Right? If you drive a person to suicide, it's murder. And certainly, Mother Rapid assisted in this woman's passing. Would you agree with that? She scared the crap out of her. And it makes you wonder how many times that she may have, quote unquote, assisted. Right? And that's a big thing with Kowalski, right? Assisted suicide. But that's not what this is it? It's not assisted suicide. Right? Mrs. Bontemps did not, she's not asking to do. This is murder. Right? Besides, Mother Rapid's obsessed with it. So what's the story? Let's take it apart by our friend Aristotle. You know me if you've been reading with me for this is where I love to start, because Aristotle knew a hell of a lot. So according to Aristotle, there are 6 main elements of a good tragedy or a story. And he's got a little footnote, and you can pause this and read these footnotes if you like. There's plot, there's character, diction, spectacle, and song, of which the first 2, plot and character, are primary. The most important of the 6 is plot, which is the representation of human action. Whenever you don't like a movie, it's probably because of the plot. It's a stupid plot. Right? This is a simple plot, beautifully written. The action is clear and the double subtle, but there's action going on. And the third person narrator describes it clearly for us to follow. There is human action, isn't there? She scares that, throwing them into them. There's financial transactions. Plots can be simple or complex, according to Aristotle, and he believes complex plots are required for successful stories. And there's a footnote. Remember our discussion of the types of sentences. If you don't, there's 3 types of sentences. 4, simple, compound, complex, compound, complex. John ran, simple sentence, right? John ran and Sue walked. Compound sentence, connected by me. Complex sentence. John ran while Sue walked. Okay? While. It's a complex thing. It's in one sentence, but it's complex. And then you have the compound complex, which adds another clause to it. The richness of language sometimes is a combination of all these 4 things. And why do I say that? Well, the devil is a complex plot. Even though it sounds simple, it's complex, which we're going to discuss in this analysis. A simple plot represents a change of fortune that doesn't come through a reversal of the situation and doesn't involve recognition as part of the hero. We've read simple stories on this website too. Mother Rappert isn't a hero. She's not a hero. And when she realizes she might come up short and lose money, there is a recognition. Remember that little paragraph where she felt fear? That's a recognition. That's recognition that makes this. Some will argue, well, Jimmy, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. That's okay. I'm telling you, she recognizes when you feel fear, and some type of recognition is going on. And her recognition is that she may lose money. In the complex plot, the change of fortune emerges as a necessity from the events preceding. She's got to do something. You see? It brought about through the reversal of the situation, recognition of both. So the plot, besides being complex, has to be unified, beginning, middle, and an end, and sufficient length to represent the course of actions, but not so long that we lose attention, right? That we lose the audience, which is perfect. This has a beginning. The mother is dying. The middle, they make the deal. In the end, she scares her to death. So you can see from the story that the old woman's dying, etc. So let's examine the character of what is character. Aristotle thought character was the second most important thing next to plot. Very important what a character is. He argued characters should be believable. Did you believe these people? I certainly. Well, if you say, all right, I don't believe anything. Well, and I know some readers, I get emails sometimes from this one character who doesn't like Maupassant, so he sends me emails and he doesn't believe anything in the stories. Well, that's because he's not using his imagination. Right? Maupassant is one of the greatest writers who ever lived, and he paints pictures of actual people. I could see people. I know people. I think maybe you do if you think. And their attributes should conform to what would be expected in similar people in real life. Remember, we read to see how other people lead their lives, so we read our own, right? Not that I'm saying you should go and scare people to death, right? But now that you saw a person who did that, that gives you an example of what you should do if you follow them down. We'll talk. So the characters in the devil are believable, right? Did you say that? Jimmy would say, without question, they're believable. Mother Rappert, she's wrinkled. This is her description. The third person narrator must be believed, and her behavior verifies this description, right? She's old. She's envious. She's tight-fisted. She's a miser. She's bent double, almost like that's her, she's got a bent double is almost like a reflection of her morality. It's bent, isn't it? It's not straightforward, it's bent. You see how words matter? This little word right here, bent. She walks, she's always bent double. She walks bent double. The Picture of Dorian Gray comes to mind. Remember that story by Oscar Wilde, where whatever the guy did, he wouldn't show it in his physical appearance, but it would be shown in the painting. It's a great movie, The Picture of Dorian Gray. You should watch it. Maybe we'll read it someday, although I don't think so. Perhaps she's the devil in the story, right? Maybe she's the devil. Huh? I don't know. That's not good. And there's Henri Beauchamp, the son. We don't get too much from our third person, but we can infer from his action what kind of character. Character reveals, our actions reveal character, right? You agree with that? You see someone helping someone across the street, that reveals character. You see someone throwing a person in front of a bus, that reveals character. You see what I'm saying? Actions reveal character. His lack of emotion, the son's lack of emotion, is one of the key qualities. He doesn't really have emotion, does he? The only reason he hires Mother Rapper is because the doctor threatens him, right, by letting him die a cruel death. He was willing to work and let his mother die. Even his mother said, no, go ahead, let me die. So he's kind of an empty vessel, right? You know any empty vessels in your life? I've met some. And then there's the doctor. This is the only one who has empathy. You know what empathy is? It's more important than sympathy. Empathy is where you actually feel what the other person's feeling. There's a great Star Trek episode called The Empath, an old Star Trek, the original Star Trek. If you get a chance, watch it. Where they personified empathy by making it a character. There's a woman in there who feels what other people feel and takes on their pain. It's an enormous episode. I don't know many empaths. I had one who used to work for me because she get it on the phone, talk to an architect for a half hour, and come back and tell me his life story. She had empathy. She was a great listener. Listeners are good empaths usually. He tells Beauchamp, is that clear? 4 times. He tells him that 4 times. Reinforcing that he doesn't want his mother to die alone. It's a cruel thing to die alone, isn't it? One of my best friends died alone. I just never forgave myself. Of course, I didn't know he was dying at the time. He died in a home. And the minute I had other friends who would go close to death, I immediately just drove over and spent time with them. You just don't want to let people die alone. Aristotle also believed that the best tragedies had a balance between good and evil characters. The devil does that. Kind of a balance? Is there good and evil in this story? That's something basically you have to decide. You have to decide. Did you see anybody good in here? Character and virtue. Aristotle believed moral character was determined by the structure of individual acts and how they fit together into the whole that was consistent with justice and friendship. So, what is moral character? And what is the moral character of the people in this story? Well, their moral world is governed by money, isn't it? The deal Beauchamp makes with Mother Rabbit to sit with his mother is a fixed rate deal, something Mother Rabbit never did. She never did a fixed rate. She always wanted the day rate, right? For the rich and the day rate for the poor. You remember that? Getting in the wheat is about money, isn't it? I got to get the wheat in. And without getting in the crop, Beauchamp stands to lose money. So financial transactions are interesting when it comes to morality, isn't it? The devil is about a particular case of what happens when financial transactions take center stage of right and wrong, which happens all the time, doesn't it? Human life. Well, what's the human life worth to you, to us, to anyone? It's not a financial exchange financial exchanges are not inherently immoral. You know, you go, you buy a loaf of bread, you pay money. That's a financial transaction. That's not immoral. You're giving somebody money to get some bread to eat, right? But it's when human life is made subject of profit and loss, right? When human life suddenly, you talk about life, how much is the life worth? That's when the clarity, moral clarity, that's when it's, these clear cut, oh no, that's okay, that's not okay. That's when clarity is bent. Whoops, there's the beautiful word. It's bent or redefined. The sick bed becomes a balance sheet. Time becomes part of the currency transaction. You buy stocks for long term or short term. Empathy, we talked about that just now, becomes a liability. You can't feel anything when you're doing a financial transaction. What do you feel like when you buy a loaf of bread? You feel great? Oh, this is great. You don't feel much, do you? When you go shopping, except, Jesus Christ, why are these bills so high? It all depends on what is in the core of your moral, which is why, ladies and gentlemen, we read these stories, because great writers like this present moral universes that we can enter into, study, and take some things out that we can apply to our own moral universe. You understand? This is very important. We all have a different set of rules that we live by, morality, right? Or maybe we don't. Maybe we're just asses, right? I don't think so. You wouldn't be on this website reading with me. So you're trying to look through life and figure out what is this and what is that? What is right and what is wrong? And what is good and what is evil? And you're trying to figure all this. Is this decision right or is it wrong? So you're creating this, you live in a moral universe. Now you can take an easy way out and say, well, I follow the 10 Commandments or whatever you believe in. But that's the easy way out. You really have to think about these things because there's really, people argue about this. Is there a gray area, Jimmy, between right and wrong? No, I don't think so. There's either right or there's wrong. These are clear things. Now, if you read this story with me, and you read it, I hope, the devil, he's making the third person narrator is telling us about this moral universe. It's a money universe. It's a survival universe. So what she does, what Mother Rappert does by scaring the old woman to death is repulsive to us. It's like, this is wrong, isn't it? Now, if you didn't think it's wrong, then you have a different set of moral rules, don't you? Well, that was okay. It was financial. This is very important to think about. So in society, everyone is trying to survive. The rules of survival are different for different societies. You must know this. I hope you know this. Some don't follow the rules that we do. Others follow rules that we don't follow. In a world like the devil, money is how people survive. Wait a minute, Jimmy. Isn't that true of us? Ladies and gentlemen, can you do anything without money? I don't know any saints that can live without money. You go to a monastery, perhaps, and you give up their stuff. Somebody still has to feed the monks. So money is how people survive. And if you think about it, money is how we all survive. Without money, you cannot do much. I had a writer who worked for me once that said, sure you can. You can have a picnic. I said, who's going to pay for the food for the picnic? That's idealism, right? Money drives everything, right? Money does. It's one of the things that drive it. So both times it's this farm. On that part, it's her midwife. We work, right? You and I work. We work to get money to buy the bread. But this story isn't just about working for money, is it? It's not. Somehow there's an unsettling possibility that economics can create conditions, I love this sentence, where ordinary people become complicit in evil. Right? Economics can, not always, create conditions where we become complicit. Well, I didn't mean it, Jimmy. It doesn't matter. We're going to talk about this. Morality, if you believe, there's some people out there reading this with me and said, I'm an atheist, I have no morals. And yet I know atheists who have better morals than people who are not atheists, who are believers in some religion. So the point of what I'm trying to tell you is things can become tangled when you bring in the money equation. When you talk about financial transactions, we've talked about this in other analysis, about Bernie Madoff and what he did to people and other people's scams, right? Scams, money, crossing the line. So this story is not about a monstrous villain like in Beowulf. Grendel was the monster. That was a beautiful story. We read it on our website. I encourage you to read Beowulf with me. It's a great early English, just a great English poem, one of the first. The title, The Devil, is about the villain, the devil. So what exactly is the devil in this? Or who? When people begin to calculate life in terms of profit and loss, is money the devil? Is money the devil in the story? Well, yeah, of course, Jimmy, that's what it is. That's what you're telling me. Well, no, it's not. Not necessarily. Is it? I want you to think about this. The transaction between Bontemps and Rappert is not just a business arrangement. It's a bet. That's the difference. She's not buying bread. He's not buying bread. They bet. They bet if the old woman dies, Rappert profits. If the old woman lingers, she becomes a burden and she loses money. The story is a study of morality about caring having conditions. Here's the key. That's caring, the word care. Does it have conditions? Conditions change moral equations. When you put conditions on being good, I'll be good only if I do this. I'll be good, just, don't take away from my allowance, Dad, right? Conditions change moral equations all the time, all the time. You're either good or bad. I told you there's either this or that. There's no middle ground. Should they? Should conditions? These are profound questions. If you care for someone, what does that really mean? What? I really care for you. I really love you. I care for you. What are you talking about? What are you willing to do to show that care? What are you willing to do? Can you put a price tag on it? I care unbelievably. You can't put it into economic terms, Jimmy. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean? What are you willing to do? There's a great scene in The Untouchables when Sean Connery is talking to Elliot Ness, and he says the way you get to Capone. What are you willing to do to get Al Capone? And Kevin Costner, that was his first movie, looks at Sean Connery and says, whatever the law says I could do. And Sean Connery looks at him with fatherly eyes and says, good. He says, now what are you prepared to do? And Elliot looks at him confused and says, what do you mean? If he comes at you with a knife, you come at him with a gun. If he puts one of yours in the hospital, you put one of his in the morgue. That's the Chicago way. So he's telling them, what are you willing to do for your objective of getting Al Capone? What are you willing to do when you say, I really, really care for someone? What are you willing to do? Can you put a price tag on that? And if you do, what is that price? Money is the devil in this story, isn't it? Money. It is the devil. Or is caring, and what price is caring? It's actually not a simple question. So you have to frame your own moral equation. You have to do it. Not me. This story gives us a good example. Bontemps has to get the wheat in. The moment he changes the fee into a fixed fee, the whole thing changes. Remember, Mother Rappert never did this. She always just likes to charge a fixed fee, a flat fee, right? An hourly rate, a day rate. But then he says, I'm going to make you a deal. This is the number. Right? If he would have simply accepted her original offer of the day rate, right? For the poor people, she had a day rate for rich people and for poor people. What would have happened? Okay, I'll pay you the rate. Nothing. She would have just made money as long as the person lived. But the fixed fee changed everything. Does anyone know how long you or I will live? Do you have that secret? Email me, Jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com if you have it. I want to know. Of course you don't have it. Once Botem's got his crop and he would be free to be with his mother. How long does it take to get the wheat in? A week? 2 weeks? Marcus Aurelius said in his Meditations, which, by the way, we read. This is very good reading, lots of readings on this website. Do not act as if thou wert going to live 10,000 years. While you're alive, while thou livest, while it is in thy power, be good. If only Mother Rappert followed Marcus Aurelius's advice. Isn't that right? Because she wasn't good. She was an evil woman. Of course, when survival is concerned, it changes everything. If you're hungry, what do you do if you're really, really hungry? So the financial logic is clear. Rappert has no incentive to prolong the woman's life and every reason to hasten it. But unlike an evil villain in a Batman movie, the Joker, etc., Rappert is a working class woman trying to survive in a hard world. Hey, I'm just trying to make a buck. The true horror is not in the revelation of her character when she makes the decision to murder the woman. The horror is in part of her character that comes out, which comes out when she makes that decision to scare the woman to death. She would have taken a loss, but her real character, the real person of Mother Rappert, emerges at that moment. As Camus said, one moment of weakness and everything is lost, theory and practice. Do you understand what that means? One moment of weakness and everything is lost. Was Mother Rappert weak? Or was she, I don't know. She just wanted the money. Moments reveal our character. Can I repeat that? Moments reveal our character. I want you to think about that. Because you experience moments every day. Do I do this? Do I do that? Those moments are going to reveal your true character. Maybe you don't want to admit it to yourself. Right? Maybe you didn't help a person when you could have helped them. That's the character. That's a tell. Rappert doesn't kill the woman because Rappert is evil, or is she? Like in the Gothic story, she's not evil, or is she? She calculates consciously and rationally. It's in her financial interest. She does it without almost any feelings. She doesn't hesitate. And that's where the true character, her true character, right? Where true character emerges in moments. And it's in these moments where all of our characters are revealed, right? How much do you care for the person you know? And what are you willing to do? Do you listen to them? Do you talk to them? Or you just read the newspaper? Boy, did I date myself with them. Sometimes you see old movies where the guy's just reading the newspaper while his wife's trying to talk to him. Here are a few modern examples that echo the similar ethical tensions for profit nursing homes and hospice. Think about this. The most direct parallel is in certain for-profit elder care and hospice operations where they receive a lump sum payments or per diem reimbursements from insurance or government programs. And if a facility gets paid the same, regardless of how attentive or humane the care is, there is a financial incentive to do less. And I'm not saying all facilities are like this. Don't get me wrong. And if you're going to think about a facility like this, you should do your homework and check them out, do your due diligence. But I am saying the temptation is there for all of them to do this. You understand? It becomes financial. If someone dies early, it can be, in some models, reduce overhead. Jimmy, that's a cruel statement. No, it's a financial statement. There's nothing inherently immoral about running a business. But the perverse incentive to structure can resemble the wager in the devil. Oh, I'll take a little bit off the books. I'll do a little adjustment in the books here and there. You see what I'm saying? Recent investigations, Google it, have uncovered some hospice companies actually prefer patients who will die quickly because they're less expensive to care for over time. My wife had an aged aunt that we would start doing research on because she couldn't take care of herself anymore. And we must have interviewed 8 places. Some would just reject her outright because she had quote unquote too much pension coming in from her husband. And she was living under me. I don't even want to tell you what the number is because it's pathetic. But they wouldn't take her. I'm serious. It's a financial transaction. And some of you listening to me understand what I'm talking about. Death becomes a desirable financial choice. Life insurance. You hear on the commercials today. They want to buy your life insurance. And some people actually do this. There's a gray zone. Life insurance can be immoral. Say you buy life insurance to protect you in case you die. But then as you get older, some people actually sell it. They sell their life insurance policy for the death benefit. You saw some stories perhaps of this where when that happens, they kill the guy to get the insurance money. Or they just sell. You've seen commercials about this. They're selling their life insurance policy early. So they can live in happy retirement. But $10,000 life insurance doesn't go very far these days. So these are ethical uneasiness around these legal transactions, and it's part of morality. Healthcare denials. Think about the insurance companies. They routinely make decisions based on what's worth covering. What's your life worth? They have these formulas, right? A 70-year-old person is not going to get the same rate as a 50-year-old person, but a person is a person, right? There's calculations on length of life. How moral is that? So these are cold, rational calculations, moral judgments disguised as policy. Human stakes get buried under these. You being a human being, who cares? It's a matter of life and death, right? And how much is that worth? In all of these examples, the moral dilemma comes from making life or suffering subject to economics. It's not about greed, although it is. It's about human nature and systems that create incentives, or goodness becomes the liability and harm becomes the gain. You remember the story from The Godfather? It's just business, Sonny, right? It's just nothing personal. It's just business. Really? None of our analysis claims money is immoral. Jimmy and you and I live in an economic world. Well, I am Jimmy. Sorry. Jimmy and you live in an economic world and exchanges are part of living. But the devil reminds us what happens when logic, rational logic, infiltrates the intimate dimensions of our existence. I love that. That's our inner self. When you place a price on human suffering, if you put a price tag on that, you're going to invite moral judgment. And it happens all. The commander in battle making the decision on executing a plan is based on how much loss of life is acceptable. They did that on D-Day. They did the calculation. How much loss of life is acceptable? Is that a financial change? Well, that wasn't financial, Jimmy. Of course it was. Of course it was for a greater good, freedom. Of course it was. Of course it was. But it was a financial calculation. How much loss of life is acceptable to getting the beachhead of Normandy? Fire protection systems. The plans that they do that are minimum loss of life and property. And you can think of other examples. Kindness, care, leaves such calculations. Of course, Eisenhower cared for all the men. Of course he did. But what did that mean? What did that mean? That becomes the qualifier. So the devil merely dramatizes a situation in which good and evil are no longer defined by intent, by incentives, about the money. And it's not personal. Remember The Godfather, like I just mentioned? Being human is very personal. Life is personal. And when it becomes just the business, well, people do things that reveal exactly who they are. And that's what makes this story so relevant, so pertaining to our life today. So, learn more about Guy de Maupassant stories by reading with them on this website with me. This is Jimmy. Jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com is my email. Please email me, Jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com. And if you have questions, that's where to find me. Email me. This QR code will take you right to my YouTube. Thanks for listening, and I hope you have a great day. Be careful of the financial transactions you get into. Thanks for being here. Have a great day.